Okay, we're live.
Awesome. I'll let them know. Thank you.
Hi. Thank you all for coming. I'm really glad to see you all here. I think I know almost all of you. And I am glad that you are here to support the release of my first book. So this book has been a while in the making, and now it's available, and you will be able to buy it afterward, and I'll be, ready to sign it. But first, we are going to have kind of a moderated conversation about the book and my writing process. Actually, first, I'm gonna read a section of the book, and then we're going to do the moderated conversation. But in case anyone was coming in order to meet the illustrious author J.R. Dawson, unfortunately they are not able to be here, so my best friend Hannah will be ably filling in. Oh wait, we were going to unmask so that it would be easier to hear us. Okay, great, and thank you all for asking. Sure. Can you talk to Emily about that?
Yeah, I can shut the doors.
Okay, so here is the beginning of the book. I'm going to read you about the first 4 pages. Chapter 1, Unplug the Phone. That's the first step in our family's lefse recipe, written in Mom's round handwriting on an index card we keep in a box with all our other family recipes. It's the morning of December 23rd, so my grandmother, my sisters, and I are making lefse like we always do before Christmas. I think this might be the first year that my middle sister, Barrett, has been able to look at the recipe card without crying. A little over 3 years have passed since our mom died of cancer, 3 years of creeping toward a new sort of normal, and I'm daring to hope that this year, the holidays won't feel as strained and empty as they have in past years. So far, no one's cried, and I'm taking that as a good sign. Today, we've been in the kitchen for an hour already, first peeling the potatoes around the white wooden kitchen table, then boiling them, using them to make dough, and finally rolling out the dough and cooking it on the griddle. Our grandmother, our best amour, is currently making more dough. My youngest sister, Maiken, is rolling it out. And Barrett and I are flipping the lefse on the griddle, filling the kitchen with the scent of cooking potatoes. I have a lot of respect for Best-Amour's strength. She's thin and wiry, but I know not everyone can beat dough into submission at 70 years old. Maiken elbows me in the side, and I say, huh? I get the sense that she's said something I should be responding to, but I haven't been paying much attention to the conversation around me because I've been focusing on the sound of the album we're playing, the national broadcast of this year's St. Olaf Christmas Festival. I've been hoping to go to St. Olaf, the college where my parents met, for as long as I can remember. The application is due January 1st, and I was fine-tuning my essay before Best-Amour called me downstairs to help with the lefse. Tror du hur långt är färdig med Percy Jackson and all? Maiken asks, probably for the second time. Do you think Alongo is done with Percy Jackson yet? Our cousin Alongo is a 6th grader, same as Maiken, and the two of them have remarkably similar taste in books. Jag vet inte. Vi får veta det imorgon. I reply, I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow. Barrett turns to Maiken and me, pouting. Can you please speak English? Sorry, says Maiken immediately, switching languages. She always appeases Barrett, and I've never understood why. Barrett and I got along for a couple of years there, around the time Mom died, but since then, Barrett's grown into an incredibly shallow teenager who loves shopping, fashion, and frozen yogurt, and I don't understand her at all. I thought you were talking to Best-Amour. I roll my eyes enough. You seriously couldn't understand that? It was all super basic vocabulary. Barrett rolls her blue eyes back at me. Her brown hair is curling in the steam of the kitchen. Not all of us can be linguists, and not all of us want to be either. Still, I say, that wasn't even hard. Even if you refuse to try it Norwegian, you've been around us long enough to pick up something. Whatever, says Barrett. Then her phone vibrates briefly in her pocket. She pulls it out while I frown at her. You're going to need to wash your hands again, I say as Barrett unlocks her phone. Phones are super unsanitary. I don't care, Barrett says to me. Turning to Bestimore, she says, Bestimore, can I go sledding with Alice and Kelsey? When? Bestimore replies. Now, says Barrett. We're in the middle of making lefse, I exclaim. I wasn't asking you, Barrett says to me. Returning her attention to Bestimore, she says, please can I go? Kelsey's leaving tomorrow for Nebraska and she won't be back until the end of break, so this is probably my last chance to see her. Yeah, for like a week, I say. I'm a senior in high school, so lasts have been piling up around me all year. My last first day of school, my last winter choir concert, my last chance to go to Barrett's volleyball games with my family, and I have little patience for a last as frivolous as the one Barrett just mentioned. You can go when we're done making lefse, Bestimore says. It should be about 20 minutes. My phone starts vibrating then, and I'm planning on ignoring it, but it continues vibrating. It's a phone call, not a text or a DM. I rarely get calls, so that makes me curious. I pull my phone out of my pocket and see that the call is from Sarah Rajanelan, one of my best friends. You were saying? Barrett says, pausing in the middle of washing her hands to gesture at my phone, eyebrows raised. Sarah's calling and she didn't text first. She never does that. Something must be wrong, I reply. Before Bestimore can tell me I'm not allowed to talk to Sarah until we finish making lefse, I swipe to answer the call and leave the kitchen. Sarah, are you okay? I think my parents are getting divorced, like for real this time, she says, her voice surprisingly steady for the news she's carrying. We were going to start driving to Michigan to visit my cousins about an hour ago, but Mom got a call asking her to come back to work on the 26th, like the morning of the 26th, so we'd have to drive back on Christmas. And Dad said if she cared about the family, she'd just say no to working on the 26th. And Mom said it's not like that and her job is important. And Dad said, who leaves on Christmas? And Mom pointed out that she's Jewish. And Dad said it's called family time. And Mom said he's always cared a lot about her work. And if Dad didn't like that, maybe he shouldn't have married her. And Dad said maybe she's right and he shouldn't have married her and he's going to file for divorce. Also, I'm pretty sure none of us are going to Michigan now. I tried to suggest that Mom drive separately from Dad and me so she could leave early, but Mom said she didn't want to drive that far by herself, and Dad said he didn't want to show up alone, which makes no sense because first of all, I'd be there, and secondly, if he's trying to divorce Mom, he's going to need to get used to showing up to family stuff without her. But I'm pretty sure my parents never make sense when they fight. Yeah, I say, as Sarah finally pauses for a real breath. I'm sorry this is happening. Thanks, says Sarah. Can you come get me? My parents are both crying, and I can't tell if the fight is winding down or if they're gearing up for more. But even in the best case scenario, things are going to be really awkward for the rest of the day. Sure, I say. Give me like 10 minutes. So yeah, that's the first 4 pages of my book. Want to get into it?
Testing?
Yeah, you're good.
I'll turn right this time. Is that great? Technology. As a lot of us here know, you've been writing for a long time. Tell us about how you got started and what drew you to writing a queer YA romance specifically.
Yeah, so I went to Capitol Hill Magnet for 1st through 8th, as a few of us in the room did. And in 5th grade, our teacher read us this book that I got really into. I really liked it, and then I hated the ending. And so I decided to write a sequel, because that's what you do. And I started working on it, and was working on it pretty steadily. And then in 6th grade, we had reading and writing as 2 separate classes instead of just an English class, and I loved that. And our writing teacher, in addition to giving us a really good foundation in punctuation and grammar. Also gave us a lot of room for creative writing, and he had this project called Open Topic, where if you wrote at least 20 pages by February, you could do peer proofreading during March, and then have April like implement the proofreading, and then toward the end of April make it into a hardcover book that he like brought a bookbinder in to help us make. This is 75 pages in pretty small font. And yeah, that was the first thing I wrote, like long form, and when I got done with it, I was like, thank goodness that is over, I am never doing that again. And then about 2 weeks later, I was like, okay, I need a new fiction project. I can't handle this, I have too many ideas and thoughts, and I need to write them down. So I started working on what wound up being a 575-page handwritten portal fantasy that I started the summer after 6th grade and finished spring break of freshman year of high school. And after that, I wrote a couple really long fan fiction stories, updating with a chapter every couple weeks. This book is actually the first like long form original fiction that I wrote like after finishing the Portal Fantasy freshman year of high school, and I wrote the first draft of this my senior year of college, and I worked on it once a week. I would go to the writing club on campus, had meetings on Sunday nights, and I would show up and like 5 of us would sit in this classroom silently for an hour and just write, and it was just kind of an accountability mechanism to be there in the same room together. And that's how I wrote the entire first draft. And this published version is draft 5, and I have not been working on it continuously for the past 9 years. There have been times when I shelved it and worked on other things. But yeah, that's how this book, that's how I got into writing and how this book came to be. And in terms of like how I wound up writing queer young adult romance, I had some pretty specific like what if questions related to my life that I was working through when I was drafting this, and this is just kind of the genre that worked to think about those questions, especially since they had to do with the period of my life that I was in high school.
Religion and faith are also big themes in the book. Judaism and Lutheranism get a lot of attention, but there are also some mentions of Hinduism. Do you want to talk about your relationship to faith and why you decided to make it such a big part of the book?
Okay, the questions about religion and faith in the book, and Hannah and Emily will work on Mike's situation, and I will answer the question. So, I think the community and ritual aspects of religion have been really important to me for basically my entire life. And I wanted to show those as kind of, normal and non-threatening parts of a person's life. And especially I wanted to affirm that it is possible to be queer and religious, and not in the sense of like trying to deny your queerness in order to fit into a religious community, but genuinely just to, the way I've put it sometimes when talking about this book is that Solveig loves her girlfriend and loves God and can do both joyfully, and that was really important for me to try to convey, that like these things don't have to be in opposition, and interesting that this book is coming out at this point in my life. When I started writing it in 2017, I expected to remain Lutheran my entire life. When I started querying draft 3 in 2020, I still expected to be Lutheran my entire life. But this is my faith home now. I go to Shir Tikva. I started coming here about 2 years ago. And yeah, it's been a really, it's been a journey that I've put a lot of thought into, but I did not expect when I started writing a relationship between a Lutheran person and a Jewish person that I was going to kind of know both sides of that. Looking back, it's kind of funny that like I read Living a Jewish Life by Anita Diamond as character research years before I thought about converting, and I got my first Haggadah from Hannah, actually, the book of like how to have a Seder for Passover, as research for the book, not as something to be part of my own like faith life, but there's a Seder scene in the book, and that is the scene that has gone through the most versions. It was the hardest one to get right, mostly because I went in with very little knowledge, and I had several Jewish friends who gave me very appreciated feedback.
So, this question,
Let's just use the.
Anna, do you want to share Linnea?
Let's do that. Don't touch the on button.
I sincerely hope I am not first. The Girls Will Be Okay focuses a lot on interpersonal relationships, and the friendships depicted in the books are peak high school with stakes that feel really high. I can verify that that is true in life. Without giving anything away, how did you get into the mind of a high school senior from starting as a college senior and write them so realistically? And why was it important to write imperfect friendships?
Yeah, I think the fact that I started writing this book when I was only 3.5 years out of high school made a big difference in terms of the level of realism. Certainly there are details about math tournaments and solo and small ensemble contests that I would not have remembered if I had started writing the book now. But yeah, I mean, for one thing, books need conflict. If the friendships were perfect and everyone did, the optimal thing all the time, very little would happen in the book, and very few people would want to read it. But also, like, people are imperfect. That's a fact of life, and I think writing the characters that way and the relationships that way is realistic and relatable, and I think it's important, especially for teenagers, to have, books where sometimes people blow up their social lives by accident, and sometimes they're able to fix them, and sometimes they're not, but like life goes on. I think that is something that many of us experience at various points in our lives, and I'm glad that I was able to kind of get that across in the book.
Fandom is a huge part of both the book and your personal writing journey. Can you tell us more about your relationship with fandom over time?
This book, the sequel to the book my 5th grade teacher read us that I didn't like, that's what fan fiction is. It's when you write stories based on something that only exists. So I started writing fan fiction when I was 10. I did not know that it was a thing that other people did or that you could share on the internet until I was 13. And that was a big part of kind of my writing life at the time, and also like my fandom community building. Since I was 19, my fanfiction works have tended to be much shorter than that, but there have been a lot of them. I'm not going to talk about which fandoms those are in because several of them are rather small, and I think the combination might be literally unique to me. And I like to keep my fandom life and my real name life at least somewhat separate. But I do want to talk about being in the Sherlock fandom because that is a big influence in The Girls Will Be Okay. So I watched Sherlock with Hannah the summer before my senior year of high school. There were 2 seasons at the time. It was a BBC show that had a season in 2010, then one in 2012, then one in 2014, and then a 4th season later that we don't talk about. So I got completely engrossed in this TV show, which is rare for me. I'm not a big TV fan. But what was really interesting about being in the Sherlock fandom was that the main pairing that people were interested in exploring was, Sherlock Holmes and John Watson, and often that pairing was shown to be romantic and sexual, and that was the first time I had read, romantic stories about a queer couple, and that was, I think, really important for me in terms of both, kind of dismantling some of the homophobia I had picked up just from society in general, and, reading the op-ed section during the marriage amendment debate in Minnesota in 2012, and also just to, learn about queer culture and, milestones in living a queer life, right? Because there are some kind of queer-specific milestones around coming out, and romance sometimes happens on a different timeline and stuff like that. But then also there were a lot of stories about Sherlock being asexual, and those one really resonated with me. And kind of what does it look like to have a romantic relationship that is not a sexual relationship because one or both people really don't want to have sex, and how do you talk to someone you're in a relationship with about the fact that you want to have a romantic relationship with them but don't want to sleep with them? Probably never. And so reading fics where Sherlock is depicted as asexual was transformative for me, especially in terms of giving me that vocabulary to have those conversations in relationships.
In the book, Sarah mentions living in stories, a liminal space of creation and existence and finding oneself. What have stories meant to you, and which stories have been a safe place for you?
Yeah, I think I've been kind of covering that already. And I love the living in stories quote, but I wanted to read it out loud at this point, and then realized that it's pretty spoilery. But yeah, I've definitely done a lot of self-exploration through fanfiction that I have written. Really worked through a lot of kind of situations in my life and how I was feeling about them, and the questions that I had about them, and the things that I was really mad about, and all of that. In terms of some media that I have really seen myself in, obviously I've talked about Sherlock fanfiction, but in terms of some published stuff, I'm going to name May the Best Man Win by Sierra Lore, Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, and Skull Runner by Fever Argent. And those are all queer stories, but I read a lot of queer stories and I don't always feel this seen. I think what really made those particular stories stand out for me was the neurodivergence that the characters I identify with are either explicitly autistic or coded as autistic or coded as having OCD, and being able to resonate with that in a character is pretty important, especially because I am pretty aware that my brain is not standard.
When it comes to books published in English, it's typical to italicize foreign words and not English text, except for emphasis, but you flip the script. English translations of those Norwegian sentences are in italics, while Norwegian text is not. Do you want to talk about that decision?
Yeah, this was a really good question. Again, written by Jen, but read lovely. Yeah, okay. But this was not something that I realized I was diverging from the norm on until Jen asked me this question. But basically, I do have some instances of Norwegian text being italicized, and that's when you've got one or two Norwegian words in a paragraph that's all in English, especially if it's narration, not dialogue. But the stuff, the parts where the Norwegian is not italicized and the English is when the dialogue is in Norwegian. And I wanted to show that this is what they're actually saying, this is normal for them. And then, italicizing the translation was helpful because sometimes in the attribution there's, a translation of what was said, but maybe also an action that the person does, and so being able to keep straight what was a translation of the dialogue and what wasn't felt like something worth paying attention to, and italics just weren't being a really easy way to do that.
This one's a little more sensitive. Solveig's grandma is very homophobic, and her uncle is very biphobic. What is something you wish you could say to those characters? And why do you think it's important to have representation like a bi-main character?
Yeah, so the first thing I want to say is that these scenes are not real. I'm sure that those of you who know me will see various parallels between my real life and the book, and I want to emphasize that, books need conflict and drama, and this felt like a way to bring that in, and this is not a representation of how anyone in my family has actually interacted with me. But at the same time, I want to say that support isn't all or nothing, and that was one of the things I wanted to show here, that Solveig has many supportive relationships in her life, and she has some relationships in her life that are not supportive. And I think that's the reality for a lot of people. Some people have much less support, but I think it is very rare for someone to have absolutely zero issues trying to go through the world as a queer person. And yeah, we've had, in some ways, a lot of progress since I was Solveig's age. When I was Solveig's age, the US did not have federally recognized same-sex marriage. And now we do, and that is a big change. At the same time, the current federal administration is doing a lot to roll back protections for queer people and to put us under threat. And I think especially in, a context of additional, or ongoing threat, it's very important for young people to be able to read books where there are people like them, especially people like them who are loved and who are able to be valued members of communities. In terms of what I would say to the specific characters in The Girls Will Be Okay, the grandmother and the uncle have different objections to Solveig being queer, and so I think it makes sense to take them differently. Bestemor is very concerned about what God thinks and what God wants, and I think I would want to talk to Bestemor about, in Genesis when it says God created human beings in their image, male and female God created them, right? That implies that God is not bound to our human ideas of being one single gender all the time, right? That God created us in God's male and female image. If that's too worldview rocking for Bestemor, I might remind her that, Jesus doesn't talk that much about marriage and doesn't talk about homosexuality at all. That's just not in the Gospels. The Bible has a lot more to say on things like economic justice than it does on whether you can be queer. And then what I would say to Solveig's uncle, because his concern is that Solveig is calling herself bi in order to seek attention. What I would say about that is that if you get extra attention because you're bi, it's probably negative. People who are okay with you being bi don't tend to give you much extra or different attention about it. It's just kind of a neutral fact if people are okay with it. So if you're getting extra attention, it's probably bad. And also that attention is a human need, and wanting attention is a normal thing. And that I think often, especially in interactions between adults and children, adults can often see attention seeking by the children as a negative thing. And I think actually it's fine. So that's a kind of long answer about all of that.
Thanks. St. Paul and the Twin Cities play a big part in the book. What was it important for you to show about this city and this community?
As I was working on my other novel manuscript, which is not available for purchase, but that is on, a solid draft free, and that I anticipate will be available someday. I was like, oh, people go places in this book, and that's really nice. And then I came back to this book, and I was like, they don't go anywhere. And that, I'm coming to embrace how rooted the book is in Minnesota, but having now written a book where they go a lot of places, I do think I like that better. But in terms of the way that I, try to represent my hometown, this place that I love so much in this book, I think one of the things that I have, realized about what is regionally specific about the Twin Cities is just that winter shapes us as a people. I lived in Utah for a year recently, and I shoveled twice. And that was weird. And I think people were doing different things in the winter and making different choices than we tend to here because there was generally not snow on the ground. I just think the amount of snow, the amount of really cold weather that we get affects how we live our lives. And I think we saw this winter some particular aspects of what it means to live in the Twin Cities in the winter and the way that we show up for each other. I loved writing a snow day and a sledding scene. times. Yeah, and then I also, in terms of setting it in specifically a city, specifically St. Paul, not the suburbs, I definitely wrote in the book about kind of the relationship that, St. Paul Public School students often have with the financial realities of their own schools and the financial realities of suburban schools they might know about from various competitions or whatever. And yeah, I wanted to write really smart characters who are taking really rigorous classes and getting a world-class education that they know is really good and that they are grateful for, and also sometimes going to a math competition at a suburban school and being like, wow, this cafeteria is so much nicer than ours. And just like the knowledge that, yes, I am getting a world-class education, and yes, we are doing it on a shoestring budget, and just kind of the complex feelings that can come up around that is something that I wanted to write about.
And finally, many of us here know that you love to sing. We are jam buddies. And you incorporated that into the book, showing the stress and beauty of choral music and vocal performance in detail. How did you go about connecting with music using the medium of prose writing?
Yeah, thank you. One of the things I wanted to do in the book was just show how many different ways singing can show up in the life of a teenager, even a teenager who's not actually in theater. So Solveig and Sarah like to jam together when they hang out, and so they sing lots of different songs from musicals, just a cappella together as one of their main forms of bonding. But then also, they're in school choir together, and both of them take voice lessons, and they sing in their respective youth choirs at their faith homes. And Solveig also sings, during church services, as a congregation member. And there's at least one scene, Christmas for sure, that the Christmas service is given in a lot of detail, including some of the experiences of singing that music. And Solveig and Sarah perform duets together, for, solo and ensemble contest and for the school senior recital. And so just I wanted to show how many different contexts singing can happen in, and I will tell you, I cut down the list of extracurriculars that the characters were involved in a lot because it was not going to be a coherent book otherwise. But these characters are still going to feel busy. They're still doing a lot, and I was doing actually a lot more. But yeah, I think one of the sentences or paragraphs or whatever, short passages of the book that I'm most proud of from an imagery standpoint, is this little bit when Solveig and her family are on spring vacation in Florida, and Solveig wades into the ocean and describes standing waist deep in the ocean as feeling similar to singing soprano, because she is standing firm above this thing that is welling up beneath her and ebbing and flowing, and she is holding her ground in that. And that is how I remember being a soprano feeling back when I was a soprano, which I no longer am. But yeah, I really liked writing about singing. It was a big part of my high school life and my college life. And it was a big part of some of my friendships. that's the end of our piece. Do people have questions?
I really want to know the book you read in 5th grade. The ending too.
It's Time for Andrew by Mary Downing Vaughn. Yes, I know you know. There are, at this point, several people in the room who have read this, which no more of you are allowed to do, because crucially, most of them were also 6th graders when they read it, and had, a different set of expectations than I think most of you do now about my writing, and but yes, there are in fact multiple people who are the acknowledgements of both this and this. It's really good to have support from some really long-time friends.
I just wanted to say, I know that Jared also painted this as a question of, oh, it's so unusual that the translation is italicized versus the foreign language. That felt very, in keeping with the stylistic guidelines of AO3 to me, and I wonder if you think that might be kind of showing through in the publication?
I am sure that the fanfiction that I have read and the fanfiction that I have written have shown up in many different ways in this book. That's not one that I'm conscious of, but that doesn't mean the answer is no. I just am not aware of it.
Hello. I wondered whether or not you had entertained different ideas for the title. And then I wanted to know whether or not there might be a possibility of an audiobook. And then because I am an English teacher, I just would love to know if you'd ever be willing to come and talk to my students.
Okay, that was 3 questions. What was the first one?
The title.
Title. Yes, I had a lot of other ideas for the title, and all of them were terrible. This was the only good one. I have them in a document, and I don't remember any of the other ones, but I looked at it recently, and I was like, oh no. This was the only good option. So that's what I have to say about the title. Audiobook. Yes, I want there to be an audiobook. I have recorded the first chapter. I meant to have the audiobook ready when the paperback and ebook published, and that is not how my life has done for the past several months. So most of it is not recorded. I'm hoping to make an audiobook at some point. I'm not sure how I will handle file hosting and monetizing it, because Ingram Spark, which is what I went through for the paperback and the ebook, I don't think it does audiobooks. So I would need to figure out some logistics, but yes, I hope so. And in terms of classroom visits, I would love to. And I have actually written, and I need to get these up on my website. They're not up on my website yet, but they exist. I have written 4 different discussion guides, and so there is a teen book club discussion guide, there's a church youth group discussion guide, there's a synagogue youth group discussion guide, and there's a parents and teens together discussion guide. So yeah, I thought about trying to write a curriculum around it, and then I realized that writing curriculum is a skill set. And I don't have it currently, and I didn't think that trying to acquire it was the best use of my time. So I decided to just have discussion guides, just a bunch of questions, and not try to make a curriculum. But yeah, I would love for people to use use it in like group settings and educational settings, that would be awesome.
Hello. Is there any parts of the book that were particularly enjoyable or fun to write, or any parts of the book that were particularly difficult for you to write?
Yeah, so favorite parts to write and hardest parts to write?
Yeah.
Favorite parts to write were the parts where people were getting along and talking about how much they like each other, either, you know, in a romantic way or in a familial way. I love those parts. Writing people being happy and liking each other, great. Also, there are several pieces of Solveig's fanfiction for the detective show that she is a fan of in the book, that she is writing, like, kind of in that moment, and you can see her, like, working through stuff by fictionalizing it, and that was a lot of fun. In terms of stuff that was difficult to write, I'm also going to give 2 categories for that. Fighting. I hate it. I hate writing conflict, especially when I want both characters to be like sympathetic. And you know, if I want the characters to, you know, make up after the fight, I have to figure out, you know, what can they say that they'll be able to get over, even though they'll be mad about it in the moment. And then even if they're not going to make up, but I like don't want to make either of them the villain, like how do I handle that? I hate it. And the first draft had very little conflict, and it got resolved very easily, and that did not work for a book. So I had to keep workshopping that across the drafts. And then the other thing that was hard to write was the satyr, just because I had so little knowledge of what a Passover satyr involved when I started writing it. And, you know, every draft I learned more. But, I really needed the feedback I was getting. And I knew that I was kind of feeling my way through it.
Thanks.
I have 2 questions. One is from Ani on the live stream. So I'll start with her. She says, what would you say to young people, like, given that you started writing at such a young age, who want to get into writing but don't really have direction or, you know, maybe an opportunity like you did to do all of that writing in school?
I am a big fan of fanfiction for, I think, obvious reasons. I highly recommend applying for an account on archiveofourhome.org. There is a little bit of a wait list for accounts because they try to, you know, weed out bots. But generally it's just a couple weeks. And there's so much to read on there, and you can also, you know, share your stuff on there. There's generally like a social norm in fandom spaces that you don't give negative feedback unless it is very specifically asked for. And I have mixed feelings about this norm, particularly in the sense that a lot of older fandom members insist that it has always been this way, 0 exceptions. And when I was a teenager, I got a lot of negative feedback on my fanfiction, and I've gotten much, much less as I've gotten older, and I feel like that is a norms-changing thing that some people are not acknowledging. But yeah, it's generally pretty encouraging, although there's always the possibility that no one reads your work. But if people read your work, they tend to say positive things about it if they say anything. And yeah, just like, you could go so deep into like one set of characters, especially in a larger fandom. But yeah, I think the amount of practice that you can get just like being in a community that is obsessed with the same cast of characters characters that you are is worth so much. And like it's not necessarily gonna, I think when you write more you do learn how to write better, but like it's not a fast track to being good at writing. But this is a weird thing to say at my book launch. I don't know how much I care about being good at writing. Like I hate writing advice, you know? There's just a lot out there that doesn't work for me, and you know, there's a lot of like, these are the rules, and you can only get away with breaking the rules in these circumstances, or like never break whatever. Like, I do think that reading your own work out loud to yourself is a really good practice, because sometimes things make sense in your head, and the words that you wrote down don't make sense. And sometimes things sounded fine in your head, and then you read them out loud, and you're like, oh, I ended 3 sentences in a row on the same word. That sounds awkward. So I think reading your work out loud to yourself is great, but otherwise just like doing a lot of it. Yeah.
Of course, my second question. So given that you started writing this almost a decade ago now, and as you alluded to earlier, right, the world has vastly changed over the course of that time. Were there things in the book that you changed along with the world, or how did you adapt things as our society and world was changing over the course of that time?
Yeah, the book does not say that it is set in 2014, but the book is set in 2014, which it was my senior spring in high school. I tried to make it a little less obvious that it was 2014, tried to make it a little less time specific. So as the drafts went by, I got vaguer about technology, I got vaguer about which social media they were using, I got vaguer about what kind of clothes were in style, stuff like that. Like I tried to kind of reduce the specificity of some of the things that were like very time specific. But if you look at, you know, which musicals the characters love, they are musicals that were out by then. And yeah, so there were things that felt sufficiently integral to the characters that I didn't feel like I could change them without, you know, a bigger rewrite than I was willing to do. So I think it will feel a little bit dated, but I don't think it'll feel fully 12 years out of date, is my hope.
Yeah, you've touched on this a little bit, and we heard about Alexa.
Yes.
But this is a book that really leans into the Scandinavian heritage of Minnesota, and but that also has a wider view than that. And Sarah, the love interest, is Tamil and Jewish. And can you talk about like why it was so important to you to have these characters have this deep cultural specificity instead of just kind of being neutral average?
Yeah, thank you very much. I know that you know I want to talk about this. I wrote a blog post that I published on St. Patrick's Day called something along the lines of like why I wrote a deeply Scandinavian American character instead of a culturally generic white one. And yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. For one thing, like my life is very culturally specific. I speak Swedish quite well. I have a Scandinavian name that a lot of people don't know how to pronounce when they first encounter me. It's not part of like the white norm in the U.S. And we have some culturally specific holiday traditions like Lefse, doing all of the presents on December 24th instead of December 25th. And And so I really wanted to represent, similarly with representing religion as kind of a normal part of life for people, I wanted to represent having a cultural background as a normal part of life, including for white Americans. Not in all cases, obviously, but in Solveig's case and in my case. And then I also, I wanted to write a story. I didn't feel equipped to write from the point of view of a character of color, but I wanted characters of color to, have meaningful roles in the story. Tamil culture is something that I've been exposed to since I have an aunt from Sri Lanka. And so Sarah's dad is Catholic and from Sri Lanka, and he's Tamil, and Sarah's mom is Ashkenazi Jewish. And so I was, trying to write kind of the cultural specificity and complexity of that as best as I could, learn about it and imagine it. And Solveig also has, some biracial cousins, and I didn't want Sarah to be the only character of color. That would have been weird. So trying to bring multiple cultures in, and I think one of the things I said in the blog post was I don't think that culturally specific fiction by white authors is at all a replacement for diverse books by authors of color. I think it's important to read authors of color, but I do think that one of the things white authors can contribute to multicultural fiction is breaking down the idea that there is one monolithic white norm that is just the default. I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, and that's something that I can portray from my own perspective, as well as uplifting, writers of color and all of that. Also, in this time where white supremacists are trying to monopolize the use of Nordic imagery, I think it is very important for those of us who are, Nordic American and do not want white supremacy to win, to say there are other ways to be Nordic American, and hell no, you do not get to, monopolize that identity.
Have you sensed that you were born to write? It's in your genes. I heard rumors that other members of your family were writers.
Yes, Grandma, you have published books. So does Mom. I do think that, it was a little bit easier for me as a kid to imagine publishing books because I had already been to at least one book launch of a book Mom had written, right? I think Crossing the Divide, your first book, came out when I was 7 or 8. So that was normal for me. We're in different genres. Mom writes nonfiction. So does Grandpa. I think I might have a monopoly on fiction books, at least in the nearer extended family. I'm really glad that writing was something that was modeled for me as a thing that people do.
Okay, great job. I'm just wondering about intended audiences, and when you got done with the book or you completed it, did you have the same, in your mind's eye, the same intended audience for this book as when you started?
question. I think I always knew I was writing a young adult book. And so the standard audience for that is teenagers. But reading young adult books has become more and more common among adults in the past, I don't know, decade or two. So I think I kind of knew that I wasn't just writing for teenagers, and especially as I, tried to figure out how I was going to publish. Reaching teenagers did not necessarily seem like the easiest thing, regardless of which path I took, because I had a couple offers from small presses that I didn't wind up taking, but one of them was mostly an academic publisher, and their pricing model was going to put it out of reach of most teenagers, and the other one was an ebook first publisher, and I don't know, maybe more teenagers have e-readers now than did when I was a teenager, but I didn't think that that was like the optimal way to reach a teenage audience. And so I think, being able to put it out in paperback and have it cost under $20 as opposed to $28, which was what the academic press was going to charge people for it, I think is kind of my best shot at reaching teenagers, but I know that I am going to need help from teachers and youth directors and clergy and parents, right? Especially because my book will not be carried in almost any stores, I am going to need help, reaching the teenage segment of the audience. I think I really, my ideal reader, I guess, is kind of my younger self. And I think I often kind of have this idea of doing things for my younger self, or people who remind me of myself who are coming up. I've certainly taken younger counselors at camp under my wing when they have reminded me of myself. I spent a while on Tumblr kind of following up with people who would send asks to this very popular blogger about I think I might be autistic, I don't know how to, I don't know what to do with that information, I don't know how to get access, any of that. And the very popular blogger I was following, did not have time to devote to that. And so when they would publish that ask with I don't have the bandwidth to help you, I'm sorry, I would follow up and message the people who had sent the asks and be like, hey, I want to talk to you about how to get an autism diagnosis. I have just gone through this process. Right, so being there for my younger self has been really important to me for a long time. I think writing this book was kind of another way to try to show up for my younger self. Is that it? Thank you so much for coming. My parents brought cake and the necessary things. Yes, the cake has the cover of the book on it. So yeah, there's cake and water and cups, etc. out there. And then there's also the opportunity to buy my book and a couple other things I've written in that will be at a separate